So thanks for being here with us today as we get started on our this next presentation, really thinking about how do we implement pooled testing. There are a lot of details. We want to make sure that we support you in getting this off the ground well, getting it off the ground right. And so we're just really excited to focus now on that next phase of really making this come to life in your schools. And we hope that you'll ask questions as you always have in the past. Please put them in the chat. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. And I hope that you can see by visiting our FAQ that we are continuing to take the questions that you put in our chat and further build out our FAQ. We did release an installment. If it's not up on our website, it will be very, very soon, coming out of the last webinar that we had. And so just keep the questions coming. If we don't get them to them today in this meeting, we'll make sure that we do as part of our updated FAQ. And you can always find those documents on our pooled testing website. And I'm sure that we'll put that link in the chat as we go along here today. So what are we trying to do today? First of all, just some introductions. You know that I'm Russell Johnston, joined by my colleague, Lauren Wu. At the end of today's presentation, and I think this is maybe, if you get one great thing out of today's presentation, it's really knowing how the Shaw Foundation can continue to support our implementation efforts. So I'm very pleased that we have Ross Wilson, Eliza Novick, Sarah McKitterick, and Michael Madigan with us today from the Shaw Foundation. And as always, this would not be possible without our continued partnership and joint effort that has made any of this happen with the COVID-19 Command Center, and particularly Jeremiah Hay and Sean Burpo from Health and Human Services, who have really just been so instrumental in making all of this happen. It's been a really great partnership. As we talk about who we are, I just want to think about who you are, and coming to us today, over 200 people in this meeting right now. I want to just pause and take notice that we gave that sort of initial date of this past Thursday to submit your paperwork to us, your application, your assurances to us through our survey. And I'm so pleased to announce today that we have almost 100 schools and districts that have submitted that paperwork to us. We were at 96 at 9 o'clock this morning. I have a feeling it's probably gone up even more since then. And so we're really pleased, again, trying to be student-centered and thinking about, I started this with those images of students in a classroom. Our colleagues at Health and Human Services always remind us of how many students we're talking about, how many schools we're talking about. And so, when we think about 96 schools and districts, that accounts for 190,000 students and 600 schools. And so, the reach is really strong. The interest is strong. We really appreciate you coming to this with such enthusiasm. And nothing's perfect. And so we did hear some concerns or challenges as people were trying to submit their information to us yesterday through our survey, that they ran into some problems. And so let me just tell you, if you have not yet submitted your survey to us, let's learn from experience. And there have been a few examples of when people go to upload the documents, because as you know, you have to upload your statement of assurances to us. And you also have to upload detailed information about the schools that will be participating in this initiative. If you run into trouble, the solution that we found is to refresh your browser. So if you're trying to upload and you get an error message, refresh your browser and you'll be able to get through. I know that it's a little nerve-wracking, like you get all the documents together, you're ready to go, you're ready to submit, and you run into an error message on our survey website. So please just know that the way around it is just to make sure that you just refresh your browser and you'll get right in. If you have any trouble at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Lauren or me, and we'll make sure that we help you through the process so that you get your information into us right away. We've also had a lot of questions about, once districts submit that information to us, what should they expect next? How soon will they hear back? And we heard some districts saying to us yesterday, it was hours after they submitted, all right, where's my vendor? And again, we appreciate the enthusiasm, we appreciate the question. Just so that you all know, there is a process though that we have to follow up on our end, such that you should reasonably expect that it'll be about 1 or 2 business days after you submit that your assurances to us, your application to us, that you will be notified as to who your match is and which vendor of the 3 vendors. Remember, Project Beacon, CIC Health, and Ginkgo are our 3 vendors, and we're so pleased to have them right now. It just takes, we asked you this information for a reason. We tried not to be the least bit kind of excessive in what we needed from you. And so it really does take us some time to go through it and to make sure that we are finding good matches. that we are, making sure that what we set you up with in the way of a partner is really kind of the right thing for, we think, your context. And an easy example is just even geography. Just thinking about this won't always rule the day, but one of the things that we look at is just, how do we try to find those economies of scale by having geographically similar vendors that are working with districts. And that won't be true in every case, but again, we're just looking at that and other factors when we review your information about how we can match you up the best. And then of course, there's, we have to dialogue with our vendors. And so that whole process takes about a day or two. And we're really pleased that we have matches. Lauren is the person who you'll hear from when you get that information. Once we make the match, once we have confirmation with the vendor, Lauren Wu will be the person who will send you an email that will say, essentially, congratulations, you've been matched with X partner, and here's what you should, here's the person who's going to follow up with you from that organization. That person will be copied on the email. So let's just say it's CIC. That there'll be a CIC individual copied on that email, so that who you are now going to be hearing more from. We kind of now back out, and your partner vendor steps in order to really walk you through the process. So just wanted to make sure that you knew, really essentially kind of where we are in terms of the amount of interest, any troubleshooting. If you haven't submitted your materials yet, we want to hear from more of you. We hope that more of you will apply. Just hit refresh, and then just know that once you hit that final submit button, you'll hear back from us from within about a day or two. And it's just really a pleasure to see the matches occurring, to see our spreadsheet filling up with all of you and the names of our vendors. Truly, next to that classroom visit yesterday, it's up there in terms of giving me joy to know that this is happening in real time. So the topics that we want to cover today, again, this is really focusing on implementation. And so we just want to go back over some of the details of overall of pooled testing, and then talk about, when we think about implementation, what are you at the school or district level going to need to do? What do you need to make happen in order to pull this off effectively? And then in next steps, we'll wrap up with looking ahead, and particularly at that point, hearing a little bit more from Ross Wilson at the Shaw Foundation about next steps. So really, again, just that reminder of our recap of pooled testing is that we are initiating this 6-week launch. And again, just want to stay on point here that it goes through the end of March, through March 28th. And we put this in bold, but just a reminder that we are making optional services available. Sometimes we call them tier 2 services, such as that assistance with specimen collection or pooled testing operations. We are really happy to make that available for you, but just remember that that's hiring human beings. That's finding human beings to come and do this work. And so, that's a limited resource. There's only so many people out there. We feel like our vendors are really ready to do this for you. But just as always, just that reminder, really think critically about if you definitely need that support or not, because frankly, the less you need in those optional services, the sooner you will be able to get going. But if you need them, you need them. We will work diligently to get them for you. Nothing is holding us back from making sure that you have those services. The vendors are well poised to make it happen. And so we just wanted to always reinforce that main idea. And then keep in mind kind of those 3 critical components that we always have to be planning for, that we have to have kind of the pooled testing protocols in place, the follow-up testing using mainly Binex now, and then if there is the need for individual PCR results, we have to, because Binex now test didn't find any positive individuals, then we have to have that component available as well. So when you're planning, it might be good to kind of lay out kind of all 3 steps about how that will happen, and the kind of the necessary components of each of those steps that you'll need to put in place. And I think what's also important to remind you is that our vendors are all ready to support you with all 3 steps. Like they're with you in all 3 categories. It's not like you just get pooled testing from the vendors. They're with you to help you with making connections between setting up the pooled testing, following up with Binex now, and then having those PCR tests available. Those come through the vendors as well. So you're not on your own on this, but it is important to kind of know where your where the emphasis needs to be in order to pull this off. So Jeremiah, I'm going to turn it over to you just to remind us of some of the critical components of pool testing as well, and just that refresher for everybody who's here today.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Russell. Great to see you all again. I know I presented this exact content on Tuesday, so for anyone who's getting it for the second time, please forgive me, but it is important. And I'm Jeremiah Hay. As Russell mentioned, I'm a senior strategy manager at the COVID Command Center here in Massachusetts, and I've been helping with this work for about 3 months now. I'd like to actually get started with a story. And my son just started preschool this month. He's about 1.5 years old. And I've been doing all this work on pool testing for Massachusetts. And one of the moms this weekend out of nowhere sent an email to the other parents saying, I have this great idea. It's called pool testing. You know, here's how it would work and how we could pay for it and all that stuff. And she'd thought through in immaculate detail the pool testing part of it, but she hadn't given any thought to what happens if we get a positive pool. Like, what does that follow-up testing look like? Okay, we have a positive pool. How do we find out who's positive in the pool? And I share that because it's called pool testing, but really, as Russell just said, it's really a lot of other things wrapped up in that. And I want to make sure that all of you are ready and able and willing and have a plan for what happens when you do get a positive test back. Because I'd love to sit here and tell you they're all going to come back negative. That is probably not true. You're going to have positive pools, and I want you to be ready for when that happens. So let's start soup to nuts. First thing is the samples are collected from the staff and students once a week. Those samples have to get to the lab. You can take them, or you can arrange with the vendor to get them over there via carrier. And then they're tested at the lab in their pooled sample with a PCR test. If that test is negative, then we're done with this one. So we presume everybody in the pool is negative. They can continue learning or teaching or whatever it is that they were doing in the building. They can keep doing that without disruption. If the pool test is positive, then a couple of options pop up, and we can go to the next slide. Thank you. And so what that means is that probably somebody in our pool is positive, one or more people, and we need to find out who they are using follow-up testing. Like Russell just mentioned, we really recommend that you use the Abbott Binax Now test here. It's very good, as we talked about on Tuesday, it's very good at catching especially the people that we're most concerned about that are likely to be the most infectious. But also it's extremely fast. So 15 minutes, again, from a parent angle, and I'm sure that any of you that have children can sympathize, the difference between knowing in 15 minutes versus maybe 48 hours, whether your child was the positive one in the pool, is significant. And that's one of the many reasons why we feel strongly about that. But okay, so you do your Binax tests on everybody that was in the positive pool. If you find one or more people who were positive on those individual tests, then great, we did our job. So those people and their close contacts, you follow DESI protocols, they isolate and or quarantine as the case may be, but everybody else can continue doing what they were doing before. If you run your Binax test, so you have a positive pool, you test everybody in the pool with the Binax, and you don't find anybody who's a positive on the individual test, then a couple of things happen. I want to talk about why that might happen. So there are a couple of reasons it could happen. The first, it could be that you just had a false positive on your pooled test. It's unlikely, but it's going to happen every now and then. Or I think more likely, it's possible that you caught someone just in the downswing of their infectiousness. And so now, as we're doing our follow-up testing 1 or maybe 2 days later, they're actually not symptomatic anymore. They're not contagious anymore. So we found something on Monday that we don't actually need to act on by Wednesday, essentially. Or it's possible that we've seen PCR tests pick up positive results on people who had the virus 2 or 3 months ago. So it's possible we had something like that. You'll see this referenced in our FAQ and our memo. Those people should not be participating in the pool testing for that exact reason, but it's possible that they had it and they did not know. So it's possible that that's what's going on. And when that happens, so you have a positive pool, you run your Binax tests, you don't find the positive person, then you have a couple of options here. On the next slide, sorry, thank you. And I will say, in this case, it's likely that what's going on is that the person who picked up in the positive pool does not have a high viral load, which means that they're probably not very contagious. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you go through this. But again, you have two options. Either the next day or 2 days later, you can run another set of Binax tests on all the individuals, and basically working off of that kind of the educated best guess that probably you caught someone who's right at the tail end of their infection, and so they might not actually be infectious 1 or 2 days later. Or at this point, and Russell mentioned this earlier, now that you've run through your Binax test and you couldn't find the positive person, the vendors are going to make available PCR tests, individual PCR tests that you can use at this point to try to figure out, okay, we ran our Binax, now it's time for the PCRs, let's figure out what's going on here. And no matter which option you choose, if you do identify one or more positive people from your pool, then exactly the same as before. Great, we did our job. You can treat those people as positive cases. They are positive cases. You follow DESI protocols, but everybody else can continue learning, except for the close contacts, can continue learning or driving the bus or teaching or whatever they're doing at your school. At this point, though, if you don't find, so you still don't find a positive case, then we've tested everybody individually twice. So one round of Binaxes and either another round or a round of PCRs, and they've all come back negative twice. And at that point, again, we're going to assume and make an educated best guess that you caught someone who either had it before or they are right at the very tail end of their infection when they got the pool test and they're not infectious anymore. So actually at that point, everyone's had 2 negative individual tests and they can just get right back to learning or again, driving the bus or whatever it was that they were doing. And I would just want to be clear that either of these options, these are both on the table for you and you can choose just according to what makes the most sense for you. And I know this is a lot of content. I know it's tangled. Please let us know in the FAQ if there are any questions about this. It's important, but it's also covered in the memo and some of the other resources that we have out there. Thanks, Russell.
Great, thanks, Jeremiah. Really helpful just to keep reminding ourselves of these steps. And really my goal for today's presentation is that if you have a few great takeaways, like maybe what Jeremiah said, there are a few things that are now resonating a little more deeply as we go back over that information. I think that's really important. Now, what I'm going to present, I hope that there are maybe some things you already know about how you're going to set this up, and then some things that might be like an aha moment or that little nugget that's just going to help to make this even more accessible, more doable in your local context. So thinking about those district responsibilities, I just want to begin by kind of outlining and comparing what our vendors are going to be responsible for and then what our schools and districts are responsible for. So on the left-hand side here, everything should be pretty familiar to you. This was in our memo last week. I went over it just to make sure that you knew that these are the types of things that you very much can rely on our vendors for. They are ready to deliver on each of these steps. I won't read them to you now, but really everything from getting that training and support set up, making sure that you have the kits, getting the results to the lab, and a platform for tracking the results so that you get the results back in in a relevant amount of time, is all what our vendors are meant to be doing. On the school and district side, what's really important is that there are actually there are responsibilities, and I know that when the commissioner spoke with superintendents this week, he reminded them of essentially you'll have to have skin in the game. There are things that you will have to do to make this possible as well. And it's really good that we see that with eyes wide open from the beginning so that we're not kind of struggling with or surprised by some of the various responsibilities, the effort that we have to put into this in a lot of different ways. I last night updated this slide so that it reads such as, because this is not a comprehensive list of all of the responsibilities that you have to take on. And there's a group of superintendents and health directors and vendors that meet together on Thursday nights quite regularly in the state. And so last night we were talking about just all the details, frankly, and that there are a lot of details involved in this. And so our hope is that, and again, we'll talk at the end about how Shaw Foundation can help you with this and give you ideas about how other people have solved problems related to pool testing and addressed some of these responsibilities in a kind of streamlined, efficient, but also very effective and safe way that will hopefully make it just that much more achievable for you. So each of the things that we have listed here for districts, we break apart now on the coming slides. But thinking about who's going to be your coordinator, your testing coordinator, how are you going to acquire consent? What's going to be the method for getting specimen collection? How will you determine appropriate pool size? Knowing when you're going to get your test results back, what should you expect? And how are you going to use those results in real time? How you're going to do the follow-up testing, and then finally getting those Binex Now results reported to DPH. I hope your blood pressure isn't going up too much. I'm going to take these one by each, break them down a little bit further. I think the good news to always remind ourselves as we're going through these slides is that there are districts that are very much successfully carrying out each of these steps right now. And so even though this is new for all of us, we definitely can get there. We can pull this off, but know-how is going to help. And so first, up as we think about that know-how and what we need to have in place. I love this chart. I think this is hopefully really helpful for you to kind of identify where you are on this chart and to know which requirements you need to meet or which ones you can ignore. So I'm not going to go through all of the yeses that you see in the columns, but let's just look at the scenarios so that afterwards you can find yourself in this chart. Are you a school or district that is not currently using BinaX now? So in our application to us, we ask you, are you currently using BinaX now? If you're not, then we ask you to follow these requirements, especially down here at the bottom about getting BinaX Now training done, making sure you have that CLIA waiver. So this hopefully helps you kind of identify, wait, these are the steps we need to follow. I certainly don't want you to miss any of those steps since they're not listed here if you are currently using BinaX Now, or if you are planning to use some other type of follow-up testing instead of BinaX Now. So again, I hope that you find this helpful to kind of identify where you are in the process and the requirements that you need to complete. I know that I love a to-do list. I love a list that helps me just sort of like take the million things I need to get done and break them down into kind of orderly accomplishments that I need to complete each day. So I hope this is helpful to you as you think about those requirements. So let's break down those that list that I showed you earlier, and starting with the testing coordinator. So again, we're really hoping that you can find somebody on staff who can function as a testing coordinator. It is an optional service. We can add it on, but thinking about what that person is doing, we wanted to explain a little bit more here. And so if you imagine that there's somebody at the school level who is functioning as the testing coordinator from within that building, that's the person who knows where the where the supply is coming in, and where are the swabs, where are the vials, and that person is getting training from the vendor to be able to be that to fulfill that role and to know kind of how are we going to administer the tests in our building, how are we going to observe test administration if we're not doing the direct administration, and they'll also be trained in tracking the samples, using the software. So just somebody who can really dedicate some time to this work from within the school level will be really important to obviously the success of this program, and having that within an individual will help a lot as well. And really this idea of kind of coordinating. So as you think about having these testing coordinators from within your buildings, how do they kind of work together across a district or across a couple of districts in order to be most effective in their work as well. So again, I hope that is just helping you get your mind around, who's that person, who are those people, frankly, that we're going to find across the district and in each school in order to successfully have a variety of testing coordinators, and definitely a testing coordinator in every building. And then thinking about consent as well. We know that we have to have consent from our families in order to get started. And here's what's really, this is a question we've been getting a lot about consent. And so this is really important, and I hope a really key takeaway from our conversation. We're making the paper-based consent forms available to you. And so, and we are getting them translated into multiple languages. And it's important to see what we're going to be asking families for in the way of consent. But predominantly, we hope and expect that you will be using the digital platform provided by the pool testing vendor that you're working with in order to have the parents actually complete the consent process. So, I'm a parent of a child in high school. I'm anticipating that at some point I'm going to get a message from my child's school to say, here's how you can sign up with, Project Beacon or Ginkgo or CIC, and here's how you can consent to participate in pool testing through their platform. I don't anticipate that I'll get a paper document home that I need to sign and return to this school. And so while I think it's important that you can see what we have in the kind of paper-based consent form, and it could be used where the digital platform just won't work because of digital access, perhaps because of language access, but by and large, our families will be participating through the digital platform provided by our vendors to get there to receive parental consent. And so everything that you need in the way of the consent forms can be found on our website, and the link is here in the PowerPoint. And you know, they cover all of the aspects of pooled testing, including you know, anything we need for participating in pooled testing, the follow-up testing using Binex now. So we think that that is it's helpful to have it all in one place. Parents will not have to you know, provide consent on multiple occasions. It will be one consent that covers all aspects of the pooled testing initiative. And just always reminding ourselves that if there will be families that aren't participating, we hope to get as close to 100% student participation in particular as possible. Obviously our staff as well, but anybody who doesn't agree to participate in pool testing can't be kept out of the school. We've got to let them in. We've got to make sure that they're part of our in-person learning and continue to educate and inform and inspire our families to you know, to provide consent. So we think it will grow over time. We certainly heard from our districts that are implementing pool testing right now that maybe you get a kind of a smaller percentage in the beginning, but it will grow over time as word of mouth gets out that this is very safe, non-invasive, not taking up a lot of instructional time. And again, just giving us all a lot more information about the spread of the virus amongst our students, amongst our staff, and in our schools. Again, overall, providing that confidence that in-person learning is possible. Lauren, what did I miss here?
I think you covered it, Russell. The one thing I would add is on the pool testing website, we've also created a sample family letter that you could use. And we do expect that you will take this letter and adjust it for your particular context. But if you wanted some sample language to communicate with families about the pool testing opportunity and the Binex Now follow-up test, that is on our website as well. And that is also translated and will be posted in multiple languages.
So Lauren, that would be, you know, what we expect maybe districts would use to send out to parents to kind of introduce the idea of pool testing, to let them know that they'll be hearing from the vendor to get consent. That's the idea of the letter.
Correct.
Great. Excellent. All right. So moving on to specimen collection. Thinking about how you know, what we need you to be thinking about is who is the staff member or staff members going to be who can either supervise the collection of, or I'm sorry, observe the collection of specimens, or actually conduct the administration of the specimen collection. So just a reminder that under observed conditions, so a staff member who is observing needs to be trained to be able to do so. They would be observing students in grades 2 and above, and remembering the PPE requirement of a surgical mask for that individual. And but if there is direct collection of the specimens, so that there's somebody actually doing the swabbing, and you know, we think most schools are going to have a combination that, you know, younger students obviously will need somebody to collect the samples directly to conduct the nasal swabbing with them, and because they can't be observed, as well as students with disabilities. And I know our FAQ that we're releasing, Lauren, is it up yet, or is it still coming?
Not yet. It will be posted later this afternoon.
Great. So the FAQ that we post later on today talks about just considerations for students with disabilities and helping them to participate, and you know, maybe you know, the types of supports that will you know, and ensure that they feel kind of calm, and you know, that students who maybe would be, you know, easily triggered by this type of experience in the schools can learn as well about how it's safe and easy to do, even if it is somebody collecting directly from them as opposed to them swabbing themselves. We're just pleased to bring you some of that information, but just keep in mind that, you know, in many cases, we're probably going to have a combination of observed collection as well as direct collection of the samples. And so making sure that we have the training and PPE available for both. And always just a reminder that the training will be completed by your vendor partner. Your vendor partner will help you conduct the training to do either. And so we're excited to make that happen. And then just always that reminder that, you know, we will be able to provide the additional supports, the assistance with specimen collection, but on a, you know, again, because we have to hire people to do it, there is just it's a human resource. It's a resource that is limited. And so thinking carefully about whether or not you can do this on your own without the additional support that we would be willing to provide if necessary. Anything that I missed from our team about specimen collection?
The only thing I would add, Russell, and I don't want to confuse people, I just want to be clear, is that the self-collection is encouraged in exactly the way described here for the pooled testing, and then for any kind of follow-up PCR testing that you have to do. For the Binex tests, it is still as it has been for the last couple of months, an administered test.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah. Thanks for that clarification. So thinking about some of the logistics, in particular specimen collection, I think there's some really good ideas on this slide. This is where we go a little deeper, and so please lean in on this. So just some ideas that we've collected by listening to schools and districts about their experiences, about how they're doing this right now. So, having that a central testing hub, particularly for follow-up testing, so that there can be a kind of a go-to place for either if you're doing direct specimen collection or follow-up testing. How is there a possibility of a central testing hub, and maybe think places like a gym, a parking lot, a ball field in better weather, not today. A testing network, so that there can be multiple locations, multiple community buildings that could be offered. So is it possible for a student not to have to go back to their own school? They could go to any school in the district to receive follow-up testing. Can they use other community buildings? Can you use other community buildings, a rec center, for example, to expand locations within your district? So thinking about just kind of the available real estate that's at play, and thinking creatively about how you do that. And we also know that we have mobile testing units that could be available as well. And this might not work in many or all districts, but if there are vehicles that can be used, we've heard a lot about, some of our assumption is based on families being able to return for that follow-up testing to bring their children in. And we know that there are logistical challenges with that, equity issues associated with that. And so we appreciate the way all of these ideas we've learned from districts that have set up different ways to get very creative ways to make kind of testing locations, particularly for follow-up testing, to be as sort of local as possible, accessible as possible, and very immediate. That something like a mobile testing van could be very useful to get these services out within the community. And certainly ideas like this, Shaw can help to expand upon as well. So thinking about the size of our pools, this is something that will vary based on a few different conditions. And so if you're in a community that has a higher incidence of COVID-19, we're going to have fewer swabs per pool. And if you're a higher incidence community, it could be that there are 5 swabs per pool, and then working up to 10. And then moderate incidence community could start with 10 and work up to 15 or 20, whereas a low incidence community might start with kind of 10 to 20 and work up to 25. So again, kind of thinking about your incident rate, working with your vendor partner to have this discussion about where are you at, what will the size of your pool be, will be really important as well, because the kind of if we don't do this mindfully, we could end up with a lot of, if you're a higher incidence community with large pools, we could end up with a lot of follow-up testing that's necessary, and we want to kind of minimize that follow-up testing or match it well to kind of what the needs of your community are. And so we hope that you find this helpful in terms of just thinking about where you're at in terms of the size of the pool that you will be creating and how it might adjust or change over time. Anything about pool size that anybody wants to chime in on? All right, going on to just that specimen collection itself and tracking them. So this is where we think about, there will be the need for individual tests, and you will find out about that through your vendor. You'll be hearing from your vendor to know who within the pool needs that follow-up test. And so to know that, though, we have to have information. And there are a couple of different options for this. And so this is something to kind of think a lot about as you get started here. We could, for example, provide the vendor with the information about who is in each pool. So let's just say it's Mr. Martin's class could be the label, or what goes into the digital platform provided by the vendor could be all of the individuals in Mr. Martin's class. So it could be just the blanket Mr. Martin's class, or Mr. Martin's class includes these 10 individuals. That'll be your choice, and that's an important thing to think through. And Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the consent form that parents will sign will allow for this, will allow for either just Mr. Martin's class to go in, or yes, I'm giving the vendor permission to tell the lab, frankly, that my child was part of this pool. Lauren, did I get that right? And what else would you say about this?
Correct. The consent form will be asking for personally identifiable information and for parents to share that with the testing vendor. And so it will be then up to the school to determine how they want to go about tracking their pools once they obtain the consent from the families.
And so what you would need to be thinking about is, do you want that information in the digital platform? Or do you want to keep a separate spreadsheet or paper list? Because if you tell the vendor and the lab that it was Mr. Martin's class, then you're going to have to keep that separate list of who was in Mr. Martin's class, so that when the results come back, you know who needs individual testing. But there's a trade-off, right? Because it'll perhaps take a little more time to enter into the digital platform who was in Mr. Martin's class. And so really thinking about what is the best option for you. I would say this is a really important takeaway from today's presentation, is to begin to think through that detail, because we want this to be as streamlined and efficient as possible. And I think once you start working with your vendor and you see their platform, I think it'll help you answer this about what's going to be best for you. What's easier, entering it into the platform or having that separate list or spreadsheet yourself. I told my team, though, that I was going to need help with this slide. So did I miss anything? Jeremiah, Lauren, Sean, anything that I missed?
I'd love to just hop in for a second. Thank you, Russell. I would frame this as, you can either put in everybody's information exactly like you said, Russell, at the point where you're doing the pooled testing. So not just Mr. Martin's class in this too, but here's exactly the individuals in it. You can do it then when you're sending in the pooled test, or if that test comes back positive, you're going to have to put all the individuals' information in the system to do the follow-up testing for each one of those people anyway. So I think it's more a question of, do you want to put in all that information up front, in which case it's a little bit faster once you get positive pools, or do you want it to be faster on the front end, and then maybe if you do get positive pools, it's going to be a little bit slower as you put in that information for the first time. But yeah, thank you. I think you're absolutely right, Russell, that this is a great thing to think about.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah. That was a really helpful clarification around, is it all from the beginning or more focused based on the results? So thank you. Thank you for that clarification. You will hear back the results, from the labs as they are processed. And so to get that information, though, obviously having that same day delivery to the lab will be really important. So you'll work with your vendor to either have them do it through a courier service, or maybe in some cases, you might arrange for this yourself. Both options are fine. The results will come in on that platform, on that digital platform, within 48 hours. So 24 to 48 hours later, we will see the results of each pool. What we've asked everyone to think about, so we're giving you this message and we're giving our vendors this message. We also think it's important for your parents to hear this as well, is that results will be scheduled during school hours, or results will be reviewed during school hours, so that we don't want to kind of create the expectation that people have to be checking for results at 3 o'clock in the morning, or sending out information about results at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we should be, our expectation for you is that you're logging in during school hours and getting that information and being able to act on it during regular business hours. And that, Jeremiah, I'm just going to pause there for a second before going on to that last bullet, because I know that this is something we thought through a lot. Is there anything else you want to add there about, what our expectation is, both on the vendor side and on the district side, for when those results come in?
Yeah, thank you. The vendors are going to send them when they're ready. So they're not going to hold on if the lab turns the results around at 2:30 in the morning. They're not going to like hold these back from you. But I think you're exactly right, Russell, that there's no expectation that somebody from your school is going to be on the platform at 2:30 in the morning waiting for these to come in and then act on them. So in terms of when they could come in, they're going to come in around the clock. But in terms of when you need to be monitoring it and acting on that, that's school hours.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremiah. And we thought that it might be important to communicate that to families as well, because we imagine that there could be families that are saying, why didn't I hear from you at 6:30 in the morning or whatever. And so really just messaging to families that everyone, the state, the district, the school, we are all on the same page, that the expectation is that results are reviewed during school hours, during business hours. Communication with parents happens during business hours, so that we don't create this expectation that we're all working more around the clock than we already are during this crisis. So we hope that that is helpful as well. And then keeping in mind as well that no one needs to quarantine while we're waiting for those results to come in. I think it's just an important concept to underscore as well. And then, finally thinking about, or close to finally thinking about the reflex testing, the follow-up testing. We know that we just need to conduct that follow-up testing as soon as possible. And having Binex Now is that no-cost solution for this. And though if you don't use Binex Now, you know that you need to arrange your own follow-up test, your own PCR test, most likely, as soon as possible after getting that positive pool results. And the cost of that, the district or school will have to bear on their own. This is an important concept, this last bullet down here, that if there is a positive pool, all the pool members don't have to isolate while they are awaiting follow-up test results. And we're glad to kind of follow up on any questions that you might have about that. If they have symptoms, yes, they definitely need to isolate. But if you are symptom-free and you're part of a positive pool, this is not the word according to Russell. With my background in education, this is really coming from the Department of Public Health and our epidemiologists really helping us with this and answering this question, which we think is really pivotal. And so just important to keep this in mind. It's also important to recognize that you can go beyond our guidance. Like, our guidance is that you don't have to isolate members in a positive pool, but we want you to feel confident about this. And so if for some reason, you choose, especially at the beginning, to take another path, to take a more conservative path, we can't stop you from doing that, but just know that that's not our recommendation from the beginning. And again, Jeremiah, I'll just see if there's anything I missed there about that important point, because I know we've gotten a lot of questions about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think you've covered all those bases. Thank you, Russell.
Great. Lauren, anything else to add about any of that as well?
Nope, but I am getting some questions in the chat about this. And yes, as long as the students are not symptomatic, if they are in a positive pool, they can come back to school, they can ride the bus in order to come to school for reflex testing.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks to both of you. So a little bit more about the follow-up testing. In cases where the positive results are returned when students are out of school, the asymptomatic members can return to school for follow-up testing at maybe a centralized site, a centralized location. And again, if anybody is symptomatic, they should not come in and they should actually seek testing outside of school. So asymptomatic pool members who are part of a positive pool, if they are asymptomatic, could come back if they're not already coming into school. If you're in a hybrid model and these are the days when the students aren't in school, they can come back in for the purposes of receiving that follow-up testing. And we appreciate what a lot of districts have done to set up a centralized location that kind of minimizes the presence of any individual inside the building. Is a fine thing to do. It's an abundance of caution. If we feel like an asymptomatic individual can be in the classroom, they could still walk through the front door of the building. That's not a problem whatsoever. But if you feel more comfortable, if you feel more confident, by establishing a centralized location where those individuals can actually just, come in, through a side door, come up to a parking lot, whatever it might be, certainly we embrace that idea as well. Again, like Jeremiah talked about at the beginning, if all members of what was a positive pool end up testing negative on Binax Now, go back to slide 8 and take a look at those options for how to follow up in that instance. So a few things about next steps, and then we'll go to your questions. A reminder that if you haven't applied for Binax Now and you plan to use it, please go to our website, our webpage devoted to Binax Now. On it, you'll find kind of two options. One is if people who are using and want to use Binax Now outside of pooled testing, we call that for symptomatic individuals. There's a process to follow on our webpage. In that instance, you're looking for the advice on using Binax Now for pooled testing. And so please follow that track that's on that webpage as well. And then keep in mind that everything you need to apply to be approved for pooled testing is all in this survey. So please click on the link. It's in the memo that we released last Friday, and complete both the authorization for school application to become an authorized school, and also our statement of assurances. And remember, those are documents that you're going to fill out and upload for us. It's the first two things we ask you to do as you get started so that you get through the difficult work first, and then kind of race downhill with the final questions that we have for you to answer as part of that application process. Remembering that our start date is mainly February 8th. And so as you come in, just always keep in mind that, yes, February 8th is our start date, but if you apply next Friday, if you get us your paperwork, you're not going to start on Monday. There'll be a ramp up period. We need to get the training done. We need to make sure we have the PPE in place. So the sooner you get information to us, the sooner you can get started. And so as applications come in throughout the month of February, you might not participate in all 6 weeks because this initiative will end on March 28th. But we do want you, we want you to apply when you're ready. Basically, you have the entire month of February to do so. And we just think that once we get to the beginning of March, it'll be a little too late because by the time we get the training up and running and all the processes in place, we'll be pretty close to March 28th. We're also very close on issuing a statewide contract that will allow you to continue to purchase these services once our early launch is completed. So as you go into April, May, and June, you will be able to purchase off of the statewide contract. And we're really excited about making that available for you. It will be posted very, very soon for vendors to respond to. So you've heard enough from me. I'm going to take a sip of water and turn it over now to my very esteemed colleague, Ross Wilson, to talk about what the Shaw Family Foundation is able to do to further support your implementation and frankly, to go way beyond what I've presented today. So Ross, thanks for being here today.
Russell, thank you. Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't say how great it's been to work with Russell, with Lauren, with Jeremiah, with Sean. This team at DESE has provided some incredible leadership in a very short period of time to really provide the tools to get kids to come back to school in person. So thank you to the DESE, HHS, and DPH team. It's been incredible work. So at the Shaw Foundation, we're just a small foundation in the city of Boston, and we support education, healthcare, and community. We've been around for about 4 years, and we've decided to dedicate a lot of our time and energy to supporting districts and getting kids back in school, and helping districts figure out all those safety measures that need to be in place to do so. And so we also recognize that all this good work that Russell has covered today is very contextual to every district and every school across the state. We've had the good fortune to begin to work with a number of districts and learn from just some amazing examples of how they've begun implementation. And we would like to work with as many districts and schools as we can to be a listening ear, to provide advice, to provide you connections to other districts who may be struggling with some of the same implementation questions. We will work our hardest to find the answer to any question that you may have. And essentially all we're asking is that you reach out to us, and we'll have one of our team members. We have 5 team members working on this project: Eliza, Michael, Sarah, Malia, and Marisa. You can connect with us via our website or email. Our website is covidedtesting.com, and email covidedtesting@shawfoundation.org. We'll be posting examples of how you can structure weekly testing logistics. We'll provide lists of different roles and responsibilities for the testing program in schools, templates for communication with staff, with families, potentially some PowerPoint presentations for your school committee members, as many resources as we could put together, along with pictures and illustrations. We'll be posting those so that they could be useful. Again, I think a lot of this innovation will be happening as we begin implementation over the next few weeks. And we are going to work really hard to try to capture all the good work that you're doing and share it with others. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And once again, thank you, Russell, Lauren, and team for the incredible work of getting us to this point.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks a whole lot. Really appreciate what Shaw Foundation will make available. And again, I think that using this this web address that's on your screen right now as kind of a frequent place to check for those updates. And then, Ross, I'm imagining that if people have questions, using that email to, also, send ideas your way, not only just, questions, but also some things to contribute to the website as well, I think would be most welcome. So we,
exactly.
Yeah, great. And, the Shaw team is just so well versed in what's happening across the state, and I think it probably help with a lot of problem solving. And like Ross said, bringing these ideas to your local context. How do you troubleshoot and problem solve based on where you are in the state, the size of your district, the families you have the privilege to serve. So really looking forward to seeing what further develops as resources on their website. So that's actually it for us for today. Lauren, we have maybe just a little less than 10 minutes for Q&A, and so why don't we see what's available?
Sure thing. Russell, we have at least one person who's participating that still needs a little convincing. Why are we doing testing? Why are we potentially exposing our staff? And so if you could just talk through our rationale for really pushing this out.
Yeah, so we feel like pooled testing is something that can give us further confidence about providing in-person learning. It's not one of the core mitigation strategies. We know that the core mitigation strategies of hand washing, physical distancing, mask wearing, staying home if you're sick are really the most important strategies for keeping our students and staff safe and to allow for in-person learning. But now that pooled testing is actually available as an option at scale, at a very reasonable cost, using very reliable vendors like we've stood up for you, we feel like it can very much help with making database decisions about what we're doing in the way of reopening our schools. And so we know that, by having adequate training, having the right PPE on hand, we can gather these samples safely in our schools, have them processed by very reliable labs, and get useful information that, again, will just help us know more about what we need to be doing to keep our students and our staff safe in our schools. And so we think that that level of knowledge is very much worthwhile. We think the risk is extraordinarily low because nothing about this is airborne, nothing about this is aerosolized. We are talking about a very safe collection of specimen and a very kind of non-invasive experience for our students and our staff to get the specimen collection done in our schools. And so we think it's just very much supportive of helping to provide a very confident in-person learning all across the state. Great,
thanks. So there are some implementation questions specifically for schools and districts that are in the hybrid model, and specifically for those who have students coming in on Thursday and Friday, in terms of when the results will be returned. If they're returned on the weekend, can they get in touch with students to come in over the weekend to do follow-up testing? Or also questions around how long do they have to wait to do follow-up testing if results are returned over the weekend? So 2 questions embedded in there.
Yeah, so we definitely hear from districts that are implementing this right now that they are, there are, as much as I said, our expectation is that you are following up on these results during the workday. like Jeremiah said, they will come in off hours, they will come in on weekends. And we know that there are certainly, school and district leaders that are paying attention to those results and really working quickly to mobilize around those results. And so we know that plans are being made over the weekend. Ross, I don't know what your thoughts are on if you know of districts that are actually doing any testing over the weekends. I'm not actually aware of that, but you might be closer to that pulse of that than I am.
We haven't seen examples yet of Russell of districts doing testing over the weekends.
Great, thanks. So really setting it up for in a hybrid model, the next business day, having that location where families can come to, being notified that they need to do this so that that gets completed on the next business day.
Great. So there were a few questions about where in the rare or in the very low event that the Bionex Now tests all come back negative, where should they be doing the follow-up PCR test?
Ross, do you have any ideas on that to begin with?
We would go, so we would actually recommend that the sample be taken potentially after the Bionex is given, right? So if your students are at the location taking the Bionex as a reflex and all samples come back negative in 15 minutes on the Bionex, that the potential is that you would do another sample collection right there with an individual PCR.
Great, thanks, Ross.
Great. There are some questions about how an elementary model might differ from a secondary model. And so Ross, just wondering if you're going to be providing specific resources for different levels of grade spans.
Of course, I mean, this looks very different at the early childhood level versus the elementary level versus the high school level. Also with scheduling, with stability of pools, who's in each pool. We're happy to post some samples of schedules at the elementary level and at the high school level and how they look differently, as well as with who's doing the collection. So if at the early childhood level, you're going to see adults doing the collection, and then grades 2 and up will most likely see those samples being collected from the students themselves. So we can post those. We can post those samples on the website.
Great. Some questions about how many staff and students need to participate in order to make this a worthwhile endeavor.
We definitely need as many as possible. And so, and again, I think you'll probably grow into it. We appreciate, for example, in Watertown that 100% of the teachers agreed to participate, or the local teachers association agreed that all their members would participate. We really appreciated that interest, that enthusiasm. And so we hope that there'll be, a very high rate of teacher participation and it's all staff. When I say teacher, I mean all staff in a building, because we really want this to be inclusive of everyone who is is part of the school community. And then, families will probably grow. So for example, again, we heard in Watertown, starting with about 70% of families participating, and now, more like, I think, closer to 90% participating. So, I don't believe we have a minimum threshold, simply because we believe it will grow over time, especially because, again, it's quick, very gentle procedure, and again, provides very useful information. And, at the end of the day, what we all want is to have as many students in school as possible. And so this, for families, for staff, hopefully it just works that, it's understood that this is a very important and helpful step in that process.
Great. And then just the last question that we have time for is whether or not any of this information will be posted on our website. And yes, we will post this recording, these slides, all of our materials are on our pool testing website. And so those should be up over the weekend or by Monday.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time and attention today. Thank you for your interest and enthusiasm for this great initiative. And I just wish you all a very warm, safe weekend, and we'll look forward to following up with you as more information becomes available. Hope we see more applications coming in. Keep them coming. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Take good care, everybody.